Well, much like the long-running Saturday night show, the transfer portal is live. And guess who's at the center of it going both ways? Deion Sanders.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, realignment, coaching carousel, and the wild and transfer portal, all that and more. We've always got you covered right here on the show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We have got plenty to get to because Miami is reportedly the leading candidate for Damien Martinez. We'll check in with Alex Donno of Locked On Canes. Is Alabama going to be making moves in the transfer portal? That's all coming up on today's show. Plus just a sprinkling of quarterback spring chatter. But let's start with Colorado because there is a big name that could be going to Colorado. There's a big name coming out of Colorado. And let's begin with Cormani McClain. Number one corner, one of the top 3 or 4 players consensus in the 2023 recruiting cycle, is reportedly going to enter the transfer portal and leave the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, McClain did not have a breakout or a standout true freshman season in Boulder, but this guy's potential is immense. Why didn't it work with Deion Sanders? Look, frankly, your guess is as good as mine, but certainly this is not a name that people expected to have go in the transfer portal unless you've got inside knowledge down on the ground in Boulder. But he played in just 9 games as a true freshman. He started 4. He totaled 13 tackles and 2 pass breakups. It's nothing to bat your eyelashes at. It doesn't catch your attention in a big way. But think about it, if this guy was a true freshman coming out of high school, his recruitment to Colorado was a story in it of itself because he has the capability, he has the physical traits to be a big time player. And so he's leaving Colorado. And where do you think he's going to look? Where is he from again? Oh, that's right. He was the number 1 player in the state of Florida. Not California, not Texas, in the state of Florida. Yeah, I would be more than a little surprised if Mario Cristobal hasn't picked up the old phone, put it to his ear, gotten Cormani's number, which he probably already had because remember, they recruited Cormani McClain and were heavily after him before he ended up choosing the Buffs. I'd be more than a little surprised if he doesn't end up with the Hurricanes, but certainly he's going to have a lot of suitors. And this is just the nature of the transfer portal and why there's so many different storylines and so many different players to watch right now. McClain is definitely one of the bigger names in the transfer portal, probably the biggest name, most recognizable name in the portal right now. And he has the potential to go to a Miami team that is loading up for 2024. Alex Donno, Locked On Canes, will have more on that when he joins the show a little bit later. But Miami's got an all-in approach. McClain could be a guy that goes in and at the very least competes for playing time, if not a full-blown starter. When you look at where Miami's secondary is at right now, they've had a lot of really, really good pieces come in. Most notably Cam Ward at quarterback, but oh boy, here's the thing though. I don't think it's a big loss for Colorado. I think it's a big name. I think it's something that everybody else can gain. But in the short term, does this materially impact how I feel about the Buffs? And I've been pretty high on the Buffs so far this offseason. Their win total originally came out, according to our friends at FanDuel, at 4.5. And I said, excuse me? Over, please. I'd like that to go. And then it went up to 5.5. Because Vegas saw, and bettors probably saw what I saw, which is that's probably a bowl team. They should be, at the very least. And I don't think losing Cormani McClain is a huge loss there for them in terms of how their depth chart was going to shake out. Maybe he would have been a starter, but certainly he wasn't a guy, he's someone who you were projecting, right? This is not a huge hole from last year's team that now has to be replaced. You got to figure out who's going to take his spot to be sure, but it's not as if you just lost an all-conference caliber player. But Colorado is going to look to add an all-conference caliber player at the running back position. So Dallan Hayden is the other name that is generating a hefty amount of buzz. He's leaving Ohio State's backfield. Why? Because it is damn near impossible to find snaps in Ohio State's backfield this year. Not at the quarterback position, which is hard enough. We talked about that recently here on the show with Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes. But at the running back position, you've got the best running back tandem in all of college football. There is not a 1-2 punch, a thunder and lightning dynamic duo, the likes of which Ohio State has with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. That's as good as it gets. And so Hayden, who's going into his third year of college football, has said, nope, I'm going to go elsewhere. And this is a guy who was a 4-star recruit in the 2022 class originally when he went to the Buckeyes. And reportedly, this is the other side of it for Colorado, is considering the Buffs. Now, that's not the only place that has expressed interest or is reportedly interested in getting Dallan Hayden. But certainly Colorado being one of them is noteworthy, because when you think of Colorado and what they didn't have last year, they had some good receivers. They had a good quarterback. They didn't really have anything else, but they have revamped. They've made moves along the offensive line. They have got good receivers. Once again, they've got Travis Hunter. If he stays healthy for the whole season, their defense is certainly going to at least have one high-end player. They've added guys on that side of the ball. There's still some questions, but they are definitely better. One area where there's a lot of room for growth with the Buffs is at running back, because you've got Alton McCaskill in there. He hasn't played a whole heck of a lot of football lately. Not sure how much you can actually rely on him. And the expectation is that Dylan Edwards, the running back last year, who really popped as a true freshman in many ways, has got tremendous speed, has had a long-time relationship with Deion Sanders. He's going to play a good amount of wide receiver this year and not be a feature back. He's a little bit undersized. I think he can thrive in that role and still get some carries. But if Hayden's looking for a spot where he can elevate his profile, get touches, and be a starter, Colorado can afford him that opportunity. Now, he has also received interest from Auburn, who we expect to be a big player in the transfer portal. I've talked about that here on the show. Colorado, as I mentioned, Louisville is in the running. UCLA, good luck with that. Look, I wish Deshaun Foster all the best, and he's a former running back himself, but if Hayden has offers from Colorado and Auburn, I don't know what the pitch for UCLA is, because I do not see that as being a premier destination. I think UCLA is really going to struggle. Their win total on FanDuel's 5.5. I'd go under that. I would go under that. I think UCLA is a 3 or 4 win team in 2024. He's also heard from Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech, both solid options with the two Brents, Brent Key and Brent Pry. Certainly those options could be serviceable. Those could be good teams. I mean, Virginia Tech, remember what Virginia Tech's win total is? 7.5. You add a guy like this who could come in and get a chance to showcase for the first time in his career with that sort of hunger and burn to be the best college football player that he can be and show the world what he can do, because so far he's really mostly been hidden at Ohio State. It's a name that most people probably don't even know until he's coming up on this very show, but he's going to find a home. He's going to go and be a starting caliber back somewhere. Maybe he goes and joins Tyler Shuck and Jeff Brom over at Louisville. That could be a good option. Louisville should be a good team again in 2024. As good as last year, time will tell. But at the very least, they're the same at the quarterback position. But watch for Colorado, because the Buffs need running back help. And Dallan Hayden is a guy that could come in, be the starter, and be better than what they would have if he doesn't go there. So that's why Colorado is at the center of the transfer portal world in this particular moment, but this stuff's changing very, very quickly. Speaking of running backs, probably the best guy currently available at the position is Damien Martinez. And the reports are Miami's the favorite. So I've been told that I have a competitive side, that I'm a competitive person as a lifelong sports fan and someone who played sports growing up. That's pretty natural. And I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, including on this phone right here. That's mine. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties just like Classic Monopoly. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But that's not just my competitive side that loves that. You can team up with your friends, play together, and earn huge rewards. So get in the game. Get yourself in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Miami is the favorite to land one of the biggest names in the transfer portal. Alex Donno of Locked On Canes joining me here on Locked On College Football. Damien Martinez has been someone that raised a lot of eyebrows when this transfer portal talk all kind of started, before it officially opened. He's been tied to the Hurricanes. What's the latest?
Well, yeah, he's been on my radar for the past few days, Spencer, because like you mentioned, it was reported days before he officially entered the portal that Damien Martinez would become available. This is the exact sort of player Miami is looking for, Spencer, because it's an interesting situation with the running back room heading into next season for Miami, because Miami's top running back, the guy who would be the featured back, is Mark Fletcher. I think it's a little bit uncertain when he's going to be back from injury. Suffered an injury in Miami's bowl game in late December. I'm not sure if he would be ready to start the beginning of the season, August 31st against Florida, or if it might take him more time. One of Miami's other top running backs, who's been their most consistent guy for the past 2 years, Henry Parrish Jr., announced a few weeks ago, it was announced he was going to be entering the transfer portal, and he has done so officially. Miami also loses a running back in Trevante Citizen, who has been so snake bit by injuries. He hasn't actually played yet in 2 seasons out of high school. So we don't really know what Miami had with Citizen, but at the same time, he does have that big frame to be a featured back if he can ever get back to that physically. So with these situations, Miami needs a guy like Damien Martinez, someone who's proven he can create yards after contact, someone who's got the combination of size, speed, and power and durability. That's another thing that Martinez has showed during his time at Oregon State. And something as well as I do, Spencer, having covered Mario Cristobal at Oregon, and now I'm covering Cristobal at Miami. He likes to have those big, powerful backs, because what Miami has left on the roster, aside from Mark Fletcher, who's big, but he's recovering from injuries, Miami has a lot of smaller, quicker guys that don't really fit the bill of players who are able to take that sort of consistent punishment. The other part of Damien Martinez is, and I know that he's likely to command a hefty NIL price tag, and he's earned that with the way he's played over the last couple of years. Miami wants to be really aggressive to try to bring in difference makers. And I know we're gonna talk about Cam Ward a little bit later. We'll circle back to him, but with Miami feeling like they have a bona fide stud now at quarterback in Ward, and they only have him for 1 season, they want to try to maximize that 1 season. And if it means bringing in some high-profile players from other programs who hit the portal, try to surround Ward with as much talent as possible. I think that's something they're looking to do.
Yeah, I think Martinez is one of the best running backs available in the transfer portal. I think there's a case to be made. He's the most proven, productive running back that you could get out there. And you mentioned Mario Cristobal in his time at Oregon. Of course, I'm very familiar with that. And, the 2 years when Cristobal had his best seasons, that wasn't the COVID year, his lead running back was a guy by the name of CJ Verdell, who by all accounts was a solid and productive running back. And I think of Damien Martinez as just a better version of Verdell. He is bigger, he's stronger, I think he's a little bit more agile, but they are physical, downhill, one-cut sort of runners. And that very much fits with what Cristobal likes to do running the football. And if you put, like, RIP Pac-12 here to the extreme, if you put Cam Ward and Damien Martinez in the same backfield, that is a lethal tandem to have behind center if you're the Hurricanes. And I like what you said about the all-in factor with Cam Ward, because they only have him for the 1 season. But where else could Miami be looking in the transfer portal? Because you mentioned the running backs who are no longer with the team. Have there been any other departures from the Hurricanes and anybody else that they might want to bring in?
Yeah, so they did lose a very popular backup quarterback. Jakari Brown is entering the transfer portal. I don't think they're going to replace him with a quarterback. I think they're going to use that scholarship and roster spot on a different position, because Miami has 4 scholarship quarterbacks remaining. It's unfortunate to lose Brown, because I feel like he's got a higher ceiling than the other backups, but probably a lower floor than the other backups. He still needs a little bit of development, but he's really showed signs of development. So it's unfortunate he's leaving Miami, but they still have 4 quarterbacks left, so they're not going to bring anybody in there. I think it's possible they could look to bring in a wide receiver, and that goes back to the maximizing Ward factor. I think only if they can find somebody who's definitely a starting caliber player. Miami starts 3 receivers. So if they look at someone who they definitely feel like this is better than one of our 3 starters, I doubt anyone's better than Xavier Restrepo, who would be available, but maybe than the other 2, they would consider it. I wouldn't consider, because they have depth, young depth. So I wouldn't bring in a receiver unless they really feel like they have a bona fide stud. But with that said, they need defensive backs. I think they're going to look for maybe a cornerback and a safety. I think they could probably use another defensive tackle if they can find a good one. And there's evidence they're looking at edge rushers, because they have brought in Romello Height, who was most recently at USC. Miami brought him in for a visit recently. He says he's going to take a couple more weeks to decide, but I think the Hurricanes are considered to be the front runner there. Miami did lose a defensive end in the portal in Nigel Kelly, who had an excellent true freshman season at Miami 2 years ago. In his sophomore season last year, he was hurt for most of it, but it does look like they want to fill his roster spot with another defensive end. So the places where Miami is good to go, quarterback, tight end, they look good to go right now. I don't think they need an offensive lineman unless somebody really jumps off the page, because we know Mario can be tempted by O-linemen if there's somebody truly special. I don't think they need one, though. And I don't think they need any linebackers, but other than that, I think they'd be pretty open to adding players at various other spots.
Yeah, a guy I talked about earlier in the show, Cormani McClain, the transfer from Colorado, has to be near the top of the wish list. Miami recruited him. He's a Florida native, 5-star recruit. Didn't work out the way he was hoping with the Buffs. And I talked earlier in today's show about how that could certainly be an option there. But back to the all-in mentality and why the portal is at the center of the discussion right now for the Hurricanes. You have 1 year of Cam Ward. And look, there are certainly questions about how consistent he can be and what do you really get from him? How much more can you get out of him? I watched a good amount of that spring game, Alex. Boy, he looked good.
Yeah, he was excellent. And, I've watched at least parts of most of his practices at Miami. The viewing periods for media, it's not the entire practice, so I haven't seen everything. But I thought the spring game was actually like the most I've seen Ward flash. Now, they did have a closed scrimmage the week prior that was closed to media. Some of the VIPs there actually thought that he was also excellent in the scrimmage the previous Saturday. But Ward rarely missed in that spring game, Spencer. And, I know that obviously it's the double-edged sword of what does that say about Miami's defense that he was playing so well. But,
I looked at some of those throws, Alex, and thought, that's just an NFL throw. And when a guy's making NFL throws, I don't care how good your defense is. As long as the quarterback has time, he's going to pick you apart.
Yeah, that's well said. And he looks very comfortable in the offense of Shannon Dawson, Miami's offensive coordinator. It's not a straight up air raid, but there are some air raid principles, and he's familiar with that from Washington State and from Incarnate Word. So it was kind of a quick fit for him. He's put in countless hours learning that offense and building chemistry with his receivers. I mentioned Xavier Restrepo, who was Miami's 1,000-yard receiver last year. Ward and Restrepo, they look to already have kind of a psychic connection. The two of them are always finding each other. Ward is always finding Restrepo, I should say, in practice. So, and I think based on it's not just the spring game. I think based on the way Ward practiced for 5 weeks at Miami and for what he was doing in the offseason workouts prior to that, I think that goes to that all-in feeling. I think Miami knew that they were getting a good one in Ward. They wouldn't have waited as long as they did to land him if they didn't, prioritize Ward. So they knew they were getting something special. I think he's not only exceeded the fans' expectations, I think he's exceeded the coaches' expectations so far. And that's why they want to go all in to try to win something with him next year.
Momentum in Coral Gables, reported better by none other than Alex Donno, Locked On Canes. Alex, thanks for stopping by as always.
Thank you as always, Spencer.
Alabama. You got to watch for him in the portal. You just do. That's coming up next. Before we get to the Crimson Tide, this episode of Locked On College Football is brought to you by our sponsor, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. And look, let's just get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising costs of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. That is what we're talking about here with Yahoo Finance. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools you need in one place. The #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. That's the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. Yahoofinance.com. Go check them out today. What to expect from Alabama on a couple of fronts. Luke Robinson, friend of the show and frequent guest, joining me here on Locked On College Football. Luke, let's start with the transfer portal. My take the other day on the show was that because of the amount of roster turnover and the relative lack of transfers that have come into Alabama, they can be aggressive in this spring portal window, and that should scare the living daylights out of other schools. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. But boy, here we are, pretty deep into the first day of transfer portal. And frankly, I'm sort of underwhelmed by the names that have been put out there. We have been having all this buildup about, boy, this is going to be the craziest transfer portal you've ever seen, and it's going to be bananas. And I'm sort of like, meh. There's the biggest name that's in the transfer portal to me is Caden Proctor, and he's already coming back to Alabama.
Right.
So, I'm just right now I'm taking a little bit of a wait and see approach. The basketball transfer portal has a lot more star power than the football transfer portal to me. I thought we may see some really big names in here based on the scuttlebutt, but it hadn't happened. That being said, I think, the day is young. Let's see what happens. And there's probably a lot of things going on behind the scenes, as there always are. So let's see what happens. And I think Alabama could very much make a move, and they have some spots where they need help.
Yeah, and certainly they have, had a solid transfer portal offseason by an average college football program standards, but it hasn't been as expansive as some other ones, or at least what Alabama is capable of doing in the transfer portal. But there are some spots where help is not needed, and we saw those on display in the spring game. I want to get your thoughts on a couple of things. First, my big question for the Alabama offense is Jalen Milroe and how he fits into Kalen DeBoer's offense, or does he adapt his offense a little bit to fit around Jalen Milroe? What did you see from the Alabama quarterback in the spring game?
Really liked what I saw. Again, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because I know the defense was pretty vanilla. In fact, a lot of people were hating on the defense. I think that's unfair. I think that this was more about trying to make sure that we build up confidence. Yes, you want to do all the normal spring game stuff, but I think you want to build up confidence. And I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, you wanted to say, hey, I'm an offensive guy. Let me show you what I can do. Probably would have been a bad look if the defense had won the day in that scrimmage. But I think that Jalen Milroe looked fantastic. And again, you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's just a spring game, right? But a couple of throws, he had 2 incredible throws. And if he can make throws like that, one was across the field to a running back. The running back made a great catch too, by the way. And he had a couple of other nice ones to Jeremy Bernard, who I'll talk about in a minute. But I feel a lot more comfortable about Jalen Milroe being in this system now. And I feel a lot more comfortable about the wide receivers, which helps a lot.
Yeah, I think he's got the best offensive coach he's probably ever had in his college career. His OCs that he's, learned under or had called plays for him have been Tommy Rees and Bill O'Brien. Am I correct there?
Yeah, you are. Very unfortunately.
And by the way, I don't think those guys are necessarily horrible offensive minds, but I look at the track record of Kalen DeBoer and say, boy, every quarterback that he has worked with has had a lot of success. If you're thinking about placing a preseason Heisman bet, I don't know that Jalen Milroe is a bad option to examine, given what DeBoer has done with Michael Penix. You look at what he did with Jake Haener at Fresno State. It was utterly fantastic. But Milroe's going to need some complementary pieces in his offense. And one of the questions about Alabama this offseason has been the wide receiver room and who's going to step up. How much will the 5-star Ryan Williams play? What sort of needs could they have maybe at that position in the transfer portal? But you liked Jeremy Bernard in that spring game. Why?
First of all, let me go back to what you said. Very interesting. And FanDuel is a sponsor sometimes. So if you can get in on some FanDuel action with Jalen Milroe, you would probably get good odds. And here's the thing. First of all, he is going to be improved. Secondly, he is under an offensive coach who's kind of an offensive genius. And thirdly, he's got an incredible schedule. So he's going to be front and center in front of the nation a lot at Wisconsin, Georgia at home, at LSU, at Tennessee, et cetera, at Oklahoma. So he's going to have an opportunity there. We're not saying he's going to win the Heisman. I don't think you're saying that. But what we're saying is it's a good value bet. Yeah. Now, going back to Jeremy Bernard. Look, Again, we've all seen pictures of everybody, right? I mean, and you'd seen some highlights from practice. I hadn't been to a practice this spring, but boy, when he was on camera for A-Day, I was blown away. He's kind of jacked. I mean, he's much bigger than I thought he was in terms of muscular. He's not, any taller than I thought he'd be, but I was really impressed with what I saw. He looked like a bigger Kendrick Law to me, and Alabama fans will know what I mean there. And I feel like this is a guy that just goes up and gets the ball. And I know he was Washington's, fourth leading receiver last year. Dude looks like a guy who could be all conference. Now, spring game, I get it. I need to temper my own expectations. But he exceeded my expectations beyond the shadow of a doubt. And now we all know, if you listen to Locked On Bama, we are a Ryan Williams podcast. And I think Ryan Williams could be the best wide receiver on this team, but now I'm not so sure. I feel pretty good about Jeremy Bernard.
I think that's a pretty good place to be if you're at Alabama to say, look, the guy who's got all this hype is maybe not going to be called upon as the number one receiver going into a year in which you've got a new head coach working with a returning quarterback and you're trying to incorporate all that sort of stuff. Relying on a true freshman, it rarely works out. Even for a guy as talented as Ryan Williams, that can be hard. And I think with Jeremy Bernard, he did get lost in the shuffle last year at Washington. But if you ask anyone who covered the Huskies last year, they tell you that guy was ready to step in if any of those top three receivers went out. Jalen McMillan missed some time, and certainly Washington's offense wasn't exactly the same. But Bernard was not the reason they were not able to kind of fill that gap. Like he was just so he was so solid. He was a top 40 receiver in the 2022 class. He began at Michigan State last year at Washington and now with Alabama. So outside of those two guys, where do you see this Alabama receiver room shaking up after the spring game?
Oh man, Kobe Prentice. I know the coaches love him. Kendrick Law. I talked about him some. This is another guy that I think can really come on. What I hate is Jalen Hales breaking his leg so badly. This is a guy that I thought he was going to really explode onto the scene this year. But that just gives other people more opportunity. And then, of course, there's Caleb Odom, who has gone from, probably the top tight end in the country when he was being recruited. And now he's come in and he's going to be more of a wide receiver. Dude's just big, tall, a large target for Jalen Milroe. And again, just calling a spade, sometimes Jalen Milroe needs a large target because his passes can be less than accurate at times. I love Jalen Milroe. I want him to be the starter. I do. But I'm just saying it's good to have a bigger target for him sometimes. And the running backs out of the backfield, they showed they can catch the ball really well in 8A. And Jam Miller, he caught a pass for a touchdown against Georgia in the SEC title game last year. So I think Alabama's got plenty of options when it comes to receivers.
Look at the ground game. Milroe's legs are, I'd imagine, still going to be at least a feature, maybe not a primary feature, but a part of the Alabama offense. What about the guys who he'll hand the ball off to?
Boy, Jam Miller looked amazing. He was the MVP of the 8A game. Just big, strong, runs with force. Same thing with Justice Haynes, who didn't carry the ball as much, but it felt like every time he touched the ball, you were like, okay, this guy's a dude. I don't really have to see a whole heck of a lot more. And then there's Richard Young, who I just thought was clearly going to be the third back, right? I mean, I thought he was going to be the Jam Justice show or Justice Jam show, and then Richard Young come in and be sort of Eddie Lacy in the early 2010s, 11s kind of thing, right? Well, Richard Young looked awesome too. So now I'm thinking it's really sort of a three-headed monster, and I'm fine with any of those three getting the first team nod at this moment. I would probably prefer Jam Miller. He has the most experience, and I know he can catch the ball very well. But I think potential-wise, Justice and Richard Young are man, they're way up there. And then you still got Kevin Riley coming in later. Alabama's got a plethora of riches at running back, and you top it off with the fact that Jalen Milroe, he could be the fastest of that bunch and maybe even the strongest, frankly. And he can run really well too. So Alabama's doing pretty well in that regard.
Alabama having an embarrassment of riches at the running back position. Some things never change. College football often does, as we talk about here on the show. Luke Robinson, Locked On Alabama. Thanks so much for stopping by, Luke.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.